I've never liked you from the start. There's no place here for a monstrous pregnant woman like you. Go home. On my brother's wedding day, my sister-in-law showered me with insults. It was my dear brother's wedding, and I desperately wanted to be a part of it. But being spoken to like this, I can't stand it anymore. The situation took an unexpected way after I declined to attend my brother's wedding ceremony. My name is Elizabeth. I'm 30 years old. I do part-time work and household chores. I married my husband Robert, who is 2 years older than me, 3 years ago. He's a buyer and salesperson for a major department store. Thanks to his refreshing looks, his sales performance at the department store is consistently good. We've always wanted children, and after infertility treatments, we finally received our long-awaited first child. I particularly wanted a child with the man I love, so I was overjoyed when I found out I was pregnant. When I told my husband, he also jumped for joy. Robert, it seems we've finally been blessed. Eh? Does that mean, yes, it's our baby. I'm finally pregnant. Really? Wow, I am so happy. I'm in tears. My husband thanked me through his tears and gave me a hug. Ever since then, we've been looking forward to meeting our soon-to-be-born child, spending each day with great anticipation. In the midst of this, there was another person eagerly awaiting my delivery. That would be my real brother, Thomas. He is 4 years older than me, has always adored me since I was young. That hasn't changed even as we've grown up, and we still get along very well as siblings. He knew about our fertility treatments, so when I told him about the pregnancy, he was just as overjoyed as my husband, even shedding tears. I've heard that our mother back home was so overjoyed that it left her speechless. Be it my marriage or my pregnancy, my brother always wishes for my happiness. I loved my brother just as much. 2 months after my pregnancy, one day, my brother called for me. What is it you wanted to talk about, Thomas? As I asked straight away, my brother scratched his head, looking somewhat shy. Well, I'm getting married. What? Married? You? Thomas? My brother went to an all-boys school for middle and high school, and a university with few female students in the science department, so I had never even heard about him having a girlfriend. Even when our parents suggested arranged meetings to introduce a woman of their friend's daughter, he never took them up on it. I think he's not bad looking, but his quiet personality from back in the day meant he never had much luck with women. And now, all of a sudden, he's getting married? I can't hide my surprise. I bet you're surprised, huh? It's quite sudden, I know. Well, yeah. So who's the lucky lady? She's 3 years younger than me, so 1 year older than you, Elizabeth. Her name is Rebecca. We met through work. Through work? Well, you see, she's the daughter of a president of one of our business partners. What? The president's daughter? That's amazing. That kind of thing happens like in the movies. As I gasped in surprise, my brother chuckled, saying, "You're overreacting." Even though she's the president's daughter, she's working hard in her father's company. We're both getting older, so we thought we should get married soon. Seeing my brother so serious for once somehow warms my heart. My brother, who always wished for my happiness, has finally found someone special. Thinking about it, I felt happy as if it were my own situation. A month later, my brother brought his fiancée to our apartment. Nice to meet you. I'm Rebecca, dating your brother. My brother's fiancée, Rebecca, was beautiful and well-dressed, clearly the career woman type. She seemed like a person from a completely different world than me, I thought to myself. Nice to meet you, Rebecca. I'm Elizabeth, the little sister. Oh, so you're the little sister. As I returned her greeting, she looked me up and down. I felt as though I had been glared at for a moment, but perhaps it was just my imagination. However, it seemed my hunch was spot on. After that, she didn't talk much to me and focused her attention on my husband. Robert, you're amazing. Working as a salesperson in that long-standing department store? Suddenly engaged in conversation, my husband responded nervously. Well, yeah. I haven't been able to go shopping recently. Next time I come, could you recommend something that suits me? Sure. Thank you. We'll be expecting you. This fiancé, she was clearly treating my husband and me differently. And it seemed like she didn't want to flirt with my husband. However, I didn't want to ruin the mood, and more importantly, she was chosen by my brother. Just like my brother wished for my happiness, I want him to be happy too. I wouldn't want to ruin my brother's happiness over such a trivial reason as her being cold towards me. Despite my numerous concerns, I couldn't say a word. Since then, Rebecca started visiting the department store where my husband works frequently. That day too, my husband arrived home and vented his frustrations with a sigh. Rebecca came to my section again today. Again? I think she was there yesterday too, right? Yeah, I appreciate that she's buying a lot, but even when I'm assisting other customers, she interrupts without any consideration. It's causing trouble for the other salesperson too, so it's a bit, that sounds tough. According to my husband, she makes purchases worth thousands of dollars each time she visits. Although it's beneficial for the store, my husband was worried, saying even if she's the president's daughter, her sense of money might be a bit concerning. Several months later, finally, the day of my beloved brother's wedding ceremony arrived. By then, I was in the later stages of my pregnancy with my belly visibly larger. It's my dear brother's once-in-a-lifetime wedding. I'm sure it will be a wonderful ceremony. I was excited the moment I left the house. I was wearing a maternity party dress I bought just for this day. The incident occurred when I arrived at the venue and headed to the reception desk. I'm Elizabeth Smith, the bridegroom's sister, and this is Robert, my husband. When I gave my name to the receptionist, she looked perplexed. You're the sister, correct? Yes, I'm Thomas Harris's sister. That's strange. Then she said something unbelievable. We were informed that his sister won't be attending. What? What are you talking about? I'm the groom's sister. Of course I'm attending. Well, we were told that the groom's sister had other obligations and won't be able to attend. Wait a minute. There must be some mistake. Both my husband and I are supposed to attend. Mr. Smith is on the guest list, so he's confirmed the cancellation's only for you, the sister. Huh? I was speechless at this unexpected turn of events. Instead, my husband asked the receptionist, who informed you about my wife's absence? It was from the bride. Rebecca did? Sensing something, my husband's face stiffened. He demanded, could you please call Rebecca here? Soon after, Rebecca and a woman who looked like her mother appeared before us. To confirm the truth, I confronted Rebecca. Rebecca, what's going on? I'm marked as absent. Oh, is that so? Well, that's the situation. Wait a minute. I never said I wouldn't be attending. Then she snickered and said nonchalantly, I can care less about your opinion. I marked you as not attending because you're a nuisance. You get it? Huh? What are you saying? To begin with, I never liked you. Rebecca, what are you? Just because you have a somewhat handsome husband and brother, you act all high and mighty. From the first time I met you, I didn't like you. Your plain face doesn't match your name, Elizabeth. You're a hindrance to my happiness, understand? I had thought she was cold towards me, but I didn't expect to be hated this much. I froze, struggling to find the right words. She looked down at me and spat out coldly, didn't you hear me? You're a nuisance. There's no place here for a big belly monster like you, so go home. I was speechless, but the shock didn't end there. Following Rebecca, even her mother started saying things that were hard to believe. Rebecca is right. It's a nuisance having an ugly person like you at Rebecca's wedding, isn't it? It's already pitiful enough for Rebecca to be related to you. Facing me, who was turning pale, Rebecca piled on, "Go home now. You're in the way, so could you please leave? You're an eyesore, you pregnant, ugly woman." In that instance, the anger I had been holding back exploded. Just as I was about to retort, my husband raised his voice for me. "What the hell are you saying to my wife? I never thought Rebecca could be this rude." "It's okay, Robert. Let's go home." "Are you sure?" "I don't want to be here anymore. Let's go." I forcibly pulled my husband's arm and left the venue. Bye-bye. Rebecca and her mother continued to hurl abuses till the end. A few hours later, my brother rushed to our home. "Elizabeth, Robert, I'm sorry for what Rebecca did." I asked my brother, who was apologizing remorsefully. "It's not your fault, Thomas. What happened to the wedding?" I asked the guests to leave halfway. I couldn't possibly continue the ceremony after what happened to my beloved sister. "That's wise, but why did Rebecca go so far against me?" "Well, I was surprised when I heard it too." "Huh?" Then my brother quietly opened his mouth. "Rebecca seems to have been jealous of you, Elizabeth." "Jealous?" "We get along well as siblings, right? On top of that, Robert is quite a handsome guy. Then you're pregnant at the peak of your happiness, and she just couldn't stand it." "What's that about?" "She was shopping excessively at my husband's department store because he's handsome?" I was lost for words at such a nonsensical reason. Even though my brother seemed to worry about me, he continued the story. "She was annoyed that more attention would be drawn to you who is pregnant than her own wedding. All the guests would naturally talk to you asking things like, 'How many months are you?' Or, 'You look so happy.' She couldn't stand that." I can't believe it. For such a reason? It seems my brother, who was busy with work, had left all the wedding preparations to her. Whenever he tried to say something, he was told, "The bride is the main character of the ceremony," and couldn't really interfere. Therefore, he had no idea that I had been unilaterally deemed absent from the event. "I'm sorry that I've hurt you because of my actions." My brother apologized again, lowering his head. The next day, my mother asked us to come home, so my husband and I rushed back. There was Rebecca's father, his face beet red, clearly furious. With his daughter Rebecca and wife in tow, he looked quite serious. "Hey, Rebecca, don't you have something to say to Elizabeth?" When her father prompted her coldly, she clicked her tongue and threw a tantrum. "Why do I have to apologize? I was the star of the ceremony." "Will you ever stop this nonsense?" Then her mother chimed in, seemingly in agreement with Rebecca. "That's right. Why should Rebecca apologize? It's all this woman's fault." Unabashedly, Rebecca and her mother displayed their fury. Then her father, trembling, opened his mouth. "You? Who do you think you're talking to? How dare you say such things to these people?" With that, her father prostrated himself before us. "I'm truly sorry for the terrible things my daughter and wife have done. Please, can you find it in your hearts to forgive us for this incident?" No matter how much he bowed, there was no way I could forgive them. I told him outright, "Do you think we could forgive you? We couldn't even attend our beloved brother's wedding. After being treated so horribly, do you think we could forgive you?" "But we're in trouble. If you don't forgive us, our company will." Rebecca's father was just apologizing solely to protect his own company. Rebecca's father runs a wholesaler company dealing with imported goods, and they have a business relationship with my brother's company. But after this incident, my brother was furious and asked his boss to terminate the dealings with that company. That's why he's begging me, his sister, for forgiveness, trying to resume business with my brother's company. I had no idea that my brother's company had so much influence. Even though Rebecca is a company's president's daughter, my brother seemed to have more clout in the situation. Her father, rubbing his forehead on the floor, apologized over and over again, but his underlying intention to protect his company was all too clear, which only made me more displeased. There was no point in talking any further. I told Rebecca and her family clearly, I will never deal with you guys again. If you're going to marry my brother, I'll cut ties with him too. Wait a minute. My dad is apologizing so much. Don't you have any empathy? I glared at Rebecca, who's lashing out at me. Empathy? How dare you, the person who caused this mess, talk about that? Who should be apologizing here? Don't let your father grovel. Your stupid selfishness has ruined my brother's happiness. You're not a good match for my brother. Know your place, you fool. After such outburst, I kicked Rebecca and her family out of my parents' house. Afterwards, I heard that my brother and Rebecca quickly called off their engagement. She was whining about not wanting to break up, and in the end, my brother had to hire a lawyer. He also arranged for a settlement paid to me. I didn't feel like accepting it, but my brother told me it's the least I can do to apologize, so I gratefully accepted. Rebecca's family's misfortune continued, and her father's company eventually went bankrupt. Apparently, losing business with my brother's company, which was the backbone of their management, made it impossible for them to keep running. They lost everything because of this incident. Now that I think about it, they got what they deserved. A girl like her, who can easily spew such abusive language, surely deserves this kind of retribution. On the other hand, I have safely given birth and am living happily. My brother seems to have recovered from his broken engagement, and he comes to my house almost every day to dote on my daughter. Robert, can you let me hold her for a little while? But you were holding her just a while ago. Please, I'm leaving in an hour. Well, I guess I can't help it. My husband and brother arguing over who gets to hold our adorable newborn daughter. Listening to their heartwarming conversation, I felt a warmth in my heart.
Just leave the gift and go. I don't consider you as family. On the day of my father-in-law's funeral, my mother-in-law said this to me, making a shooing gesture. Besides, if people find out that a poor and disgraceful woman like you is my daughter-in-law, it would be a shame for the entire family. I was worn out by my mother-in-law's attitude and harassment, so I decided to do as she said and just leave the gift and go. 3 days after the funeral, I was struck by mysterious nausea and ill health, and I went back to my parents' home to recuperate. While resting in the living room, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, my frantic mother-in-law grabbed my hands and said, "I'm sorry, I had no idea this was happening." My name is Rosemary. I had been single forever, but at the age of 30, I met Kevin through a hobby class that a friend invited me to. We hit it off because of our many common interests. And after a year of dating, we got married. Kevin is the same age as me. He's very handsome, kind, highly educated, and came from a wealthy and respectable family. I didn't know about his background when we started dating, so I didn't choose him for those reasons. In fact, I felt that there must be many more wonderful women who would be a better match for him than me. When I found out about Kevin's qualifications, I was so worried that we might be mismatched, and I wondered if I was really good enough for him. But Kevin accepted me. I love you, Rosemary. You're the one. I accepted his proposal, and we got married. He's the son of a listed enterprise CEO, and is on the fast track to success. I couldn't help but wonder why such an impressive man hadn't had any relationships with women until he was 30. But I was so ecstatic that I didn't have time to worry about it. He never let his father's power get to his head or become lazy. He worked hard and climbed the corporate ladder, and it seems he was finally recognized as a successor by his father, the president, just recently. My husband and father-in-law were very busy preparing to take over the company, so they were rarely home, and we didn't have much family time. It seemed like they only came home to sleep, but they never neglected me. They would contact me when they had time, and they prioritized spending time with me on their rare days off. Honestly, he was a good husband. I vowed to support him forever. I was truly happy to be his wife, except for one thing. After getting married, I moved into Kevin's family home. I had planned to work to repay the student loans I had taken out during college, but Kevin pleaded, "I'll work hard to earn enough for the both of us, so please stay home and support me." I gave in to my husband's insistence and quit my job, moving into my in-laws' house. Honestly, I liked my job, so quitting was a bit of a shock. It turned out that the reason I quit my job was that my mother-in-law, Josie, had interfered with Kevin. She had apparently convinced him that a working wife would reflect poorly on the husband. Because of that, I ended up spending most of my day at my in-laws' house. My husband and father-in-law were rarely home because they were busy, but my stay-at-home mother-in-law, Josie, was always there, and I spent a lot of time with her. But this mother-in-law was a person to be wary of. Josie seemed to dislike me, tormenting me with harassment and snide remarks. The reason was probably that she thought I was beneath their social status. Her family was wealthy and consisted of business owners. Moreover, they came from a good family background, and apparently there were many influential figures in politics, finance, medicine, chemistry, and various other fields in their clan. Almost all their family members were highly educated, having graduated from Harvard or other prestigious universities. And my mother-in-law herself had graduated from a renowned university. She was proud of this and flaunted it. On the other hand, my family was just an ordinary one. My parents were regular office workers, and we were neither poor nor wealthy. I attended a regular college, and I paid for my tuition with scholarships. It wasn't just my family background or university that Josie complained about. She also criticized my appearance. Josie, in her 50s, was beautiful and youthful, always dressed in flashy designer brands. She had been a model when she was young, won beauty contests in college, and was working in sales at the largest advertising agency before getting married. I, on the other hand, had no interest in designer brands and preferred to spend my money on anime and game merchandise. As a result, I was never considered beautiful. I did the bare minimum with makeup and fashion and took care of my figure, but my appearance was quite plain. Naturally, the glamorous world of modeling, beauty contests, and major advertising agencies was foreign to me. My social media was all about games and anime. Josie seemed really displeased that her son had married someone as plain and low as me, both in education and family background. So, she harassed me in every way she could think of. She would intentionally spill Coke on my freshly washed clothes, or mess up a room I had just cleaned. Entertainment was forbidden. I was forced to quit the hobby that led me to meet Kevin, and she deleted all my contacts. My anime and game collections were sold off at a very low price, and the money became Josie's pocket money. I couldn't even go shopping without being attacked with nasty comments. My clothes and cosmetics were sold with the excuse that a wife doesn't need to be fashionable, and of course, that money also went to Josie. Makeup was forbidden, and I was only allowed to wear sweatpants at home and a suit when outside. All my savings from my single days were confiscated. The dinners I made were thrown away. Plus, they were dumped on the floor, and Josie would laughingly take pictures with her phone and share them on social media. By the way, the only food I was allowed to eat was leftovers. "A perfect meal for a poor, pathetic person," she would say, sharing and laughing with her friends. Birds of a feather flocked together indeed, as my mother-in-law's friends were all wealthy and glamorous. Yet they were all nasty people who looked down on others. Look at my poor daughter-in-law. How could she have lived like this until now? If it were me, I'd be too ashamed to live. I had no choice but to endure this humiliation. After enduring this life for about a year, my father-in-law passed away. He had been suffering from terminal cancer and had actually lived longer than the prognosis. I was tasked with preparing for his funeral. Kevin was swamped with taking over the company, so he had no time to prepare for the funeral. "I don't know anything about this. Rosemary, can you handle it for me?" Josie said and dumped everything on me, lounging around without lifting a finger. I became extremely busy preparing for my father-in-law's funeral, sparing no time for sleep, and my fatigue reached its limit. Somehow, I managed to finish the preparations, and the day of the funeral arrived. However, when I tried to attend the funeral, Josie stood in front of me and said something outrageous. "Rosemary, please just leave the gift and go home." I couldn't hide my surprise at this sudden request. I don't consider you as family. Besides, if people find out that a plain and unattractive woman like you is Kevin's wife, it would be a disgrace to the whole family. From my perspective, my mother-in-law's hysterical ranting was far more embarrassing, but I knew that arguing back would only heat things up and cause more commotion. Understood, I replied, and left the funeral venue after placing the gift. 3 days after the funeral, I was struck by mysterious nausea and ill health, so I went back to my parents' house to recuperate. I couldn't rest at home with Josie's harassment. My parents were at work, and I was resting alone in the living room when the doorbell rang. Looking at the camera, I saw Josie repeatedly ringing the doorbell. At first I ignored it, but she kept ringing the doorbell and yelling at the front door, causing a nuisance to the neighbors, so I reluctantly opened the door. She probably came to take me back, her outlet for household stress and frustration. However, contrary to my expectations, Josie suddenly apologized to me. "What is going on?" I said, unable to suppress my annoyance, and Josie, in a desperate state, threw words of apology at me. "I didn't know. I had no idea it would come to this." So here's what happened. My father-in-law had noticed Josie's harassment towards me. Initially, Josie hid her true nature in front of my father-in-law and Kevin. But my father-in-law, sensing something off in Josie's relationship with me, confronted her, and she readily confessed. He tried to persuade her to stop the harassment several times, but Josie wouldn't listen. Instead, she became defiant and started bad-mouthing me to my father-in-law. For my father-in-law, who was in the final stages of cancer, persuading Josie was all he could manage. Feeling sorry for me as I was wasting away from the stress of Josie's harassment, my father-in-law left a will before passing away. It stated that he would leave all his inheritance to me. "Please, Rosemary, I apologize for everything. Share the inheritance with me," Josie begged desperately. "It's not fair. I was robbed of everything and then married. After taking everything from me, leaving me nothing is just wrong," she screamed in a state of confusion. There was a sad story behind the seemingly glamorous mother-in-law. Her marriage to her husband was a political one. Josie had a lover to whom she had promised to marry. However, her family's business was on the brink of bankruptcy at the time, so they agreed to assist Josie's family on the condition that she married my father-in-law. Josie's life was hell, forced apart from her fiancé, whom she had loved dearly, and marry a man she didn't like. My father-in-law also had a lover, but due to differences in social ranks, everyone around him strongly opposed the marriage, and they reluctantly parted ways. However, he seemed to have continued his relationship with his former lover, even after marrying Josie. On the other hand, Josie suffered terrible harassment from her mother-in-law, Kevin's grandmother, at a level incomparable to what I endured from Josie. She was virtually imprisoned, overworked, and forced to quit the job she loved. Because it was a political marriage, even her parents turned against her. Her husband was indifferent and prioritized his lover, and divorce was not allowed, nor was she allowed to see her former lover. In such a life, her only son, Kevin, was her sole reason for living. Josie finally regained her freedom when Kevin's grandmother passed away, but her love for her son had become completely twisted. She had harassed and driven away women who got close to Kevin. The reason Kevin, who was good-looking, well-off, from a good family, and presumably had no personality flaws, had no dating experience until the age of 30, was also due to his mother. Naturally, I was no exception. Josie could never forgive me, someone who had taken her son and had a proper marriage, something she was not allowed. So she tried every trick in the book to harass me and make Kevin and me divorce. I felt sorry for Josie after hearing her circumstances. However, "Josie, I certainly sympathize with your situation, but..." I approached Josie and whispered in her ear, "You've repeatedly called me poor and unattractive and made fun of me with your friends, you know. That was... You haven't forgotten about throwing away my food and messing up the room I just cleaned, have you? So that's what I'm sorry. Apologies don't solve everything, do they, Josie?" She was stunned by my words. While Josie's situation was pitiable, it didn't mean I could just pretend her harassment never happened. "I won't give you the inheritance. I'll use it meaningfully for repaying my student loans and for the education of the child who will be born in the near future. No matter the circumstances, I would probably never forgive Josie for what she did to me." "I never thought you were like that. I misjudged you, Mom." Kevin's angry voice echoed through the living room. Kevin had learned about his mother's harassment towards me through the will. He also found out that she had harassed every woman who got close to him since his student days, and in his anger, he declared he no longer wanted any relations with her. "Rosemary, I'm sorry I didn't notice sooner." Kevin hugged me, crying and apologizing. It wasn't Kevin's fault, as he was too busy to come home often. I even felt guilty for making him cry and apologize. Josie, who was cut off by Kevin, was yelling something, but Kevin's determination was firm, and we as a couple decided to move out of the in-laws' house soon. I stayed at my parents' house until the move was complete. By the way, the in-laws' house was in Kevin's name, so it was quickly put up for sale. As a result, Josie had no choice but to leave the house, and is now forced to live alone in a cheap apartment. Since she's still in her 50s, she's working, something she's not used to. Also, word of her harassment spread throughout the neighborhood. Originally, she was disliked for flaunting her wealth and constantly showing off to those around her, and now she's become completely isolated from her neighbors. Even her former friends, who once praised Josie and laughed at me for being poor, have turned on her and are making fun of her now that she's living in poverty. Incidentally, Josie went to see her former fiancé for the first time in 30 years, but he had long forgotten about her, had married, and had a family. I also heard that she caused a scene at his doorstep, leading to police involvement. Her once prided beauty has also drastically changed due to stress. I recently saw Josie in town wearing tattered clothes, her face suddenly aged, and she had gained a lot of weight. On the other hand, Kevin successfully took over the company and became its president. The business is thriving and on the rise. We as a couple moved to a high-rise apartment close to my parents' home. We further increased the assets left by my father-in-law through investments and are leading a prosperous life. I vow to devote myself to my husband, Kevin, and the baby in my belly from now on.